Board of Directors, regular meeting, Trophy Club Municipal Utility District number 1 to order at 6:31, and we do have a quorum. And today is March 20th, 2018, and it's first one is citizens' comments. And we have one person that wants to. Oh, sorry about that. You want me to say it all over, or can you? You can just type it in for the hearing impaired? Okay. Okay, we have one citizen that wants to speak. Ms. Gilliam, you want to say something?
Yes, I do.
Step up to the microphone and state your address and your name, please. Thank you for coming.
My name is Bob Gilliam, 116 Oakmont. This is Trophy Club House number 1, and I've got all the documentation. In 1949, Mr. Hogan and his wife Valerie were driving east out of El Paso, and in the vicinity of Van Horn, they had a head-on collision with a Greyhound bus, which was passing a car that was going westbound. They were going eastbound. It was passing a car that was going too slow for him, and they hit Mr. Hogan and Valerie's car head-on. You know, anybody knows more about this, go right ahead. He dove to the right to protect Valerie, and consequently, the steering wheel would have killed him. But it didn't. But he was beat up pretty bad. He was told that he might ever walk again, but he would never play golf again. 1949, January, February. He won the 1950 U.S. Open, and in 1953, he won the U.S. Open, the Masters, and the British Open, the only time he ever entered the British Open. And he put, he won the U.S. Open at Oakmont, Pennsylvania. He won the British Open, he won the Masters, he won the British Open at Carnoustie, Scotland. And he put Trophy Club House number 1 on the corner of Oakmont and Carnoustie. And I am the only owner of that house, 42 years ago. Our son was 1 when we moved into the house, and he just had his 43rd birthday. So I've got a bunch of documentation here, but so what he did was, Oakmont and Carnoustie, he decided when he came here, he was going to put house number 1 on the corner of Oakmont and Carnoustie, and he did. I was living in North Dallas, and I told my wife, I read in Golf Digest that Mr. Hogan had almost closed on some property in Houston, and I said, if it ever happens here, we're going to buy a lot the first day they sell lots. Well, it happened here, and I bought a lot on Carnoustie, and a friend of mine bought a lot on Carnoustie, and we split a lot on Carnoustie on the dog leg of 16, so that we would have a lot and a half or 2 lots if somebody wanted to build something really fancy. It didn't end up happening. A builder bought the 3 lots from us later, but we made a little money on it. But I met Charlie Siddig, the salesman, here, and because I bought stuff on the first day, he came to me a few months later and he said, Bill Williamson, the project manager, had been living in house number 1. He didn't own it, but he'd been living in it. They decided to get him out of there and sell the house. Charlie Siddig said, they're getting ready to sell the house. Do you want to buy it? And I said, what are they asking? He said $67,500, and I made a $64,500 offer, and they took it, okay? So this is 2,400 square feet in 1976. And like I said, we're the only owners of that property. Now, he had to establish, this is why I'm here. 3 houses had to be built to create Denton County Mud 1, unincorporated Trophy Club, okay? So when it got incorporated, you became Mud 1. But he had to build 3 houses to establish Mud One, and this one of mine, and I've got all the documentation, the booth, everything. He put all 3 houses on Oakmont Drive, but this is on the corner of Oakmont and Carnoustie, as I said. And I've always called that Hogan's Corner for the very same reason. I am here to ask you to designate that house, because it's Mud One's first house, as a historic house number 1, if you can make a sign or something. And also, I'm asking to have my Mud One taxes removed. And I had a third thing. Oh, have the Trophy Club grounds people taking care of the outside of my house. So that's what I'm here for, and I guess I'm done. However, I've got 2 photographs here that of only one house. Indian Creek's not even on here. 114 is a 2-lane road. Should I bring those up, or do you want to look at them or anything?
No, that's all right. Are you gonna leave them here?
No, I can't. Well, you can take pictures of them.
Yeah, in this citizen presentation, if you just wait a second, I failed to read this, and it explains that we can't interact with you. This is a citizen's presentation, but I'll read it real quick. This is an opportunity for citizens to address the board on any matter, whether or not it is posted on the agenda. The board is not permitted to take action on or discuss any presentations made to the board at this time concerning an item not listed on the agenda. The board will hear presentations on specific agenda items prior to the board addressing those items. You may speak up to 3 minutes or the time limit determined by the president or the presiding officer, which, I mean, you can speak whatever you want
Okay.
as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
But,
Well, it created Mud One, so,
mhm,
and you're here,
okay,
and I'm
Well,
here.
okay. Well, I appreciate you coming by.
Do you want to see the, you want to see any of the paperwork? for the
Right
photo?
now, we can't interact, is that correct, Tony?
Yeah, the board can't deliberate or take any action in
You
response to.
You can
these
pass
items.
them. You want to see them?
No, let Carmen do it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, move on, Kim.
Right here. Sure. How about these?
Carmen, Tony can talk with Mr. Gilliam offline as we continue, if that's all right. Yeah, I really appreciate you coming by with those documents. Okay, we're going to move on to the consent agenda. All matters listed as consent agenda are considered to be routine by the Board of Directors and will be enacted by one motion. There will not be a separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Do I have anyone that wishes to remove anything from the consent agenda? Anyone? Okay. We will consider and take appropriate action to approve the consent agenda. A, February 2018 check register, February 2018 regular meeting minutes.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda items, the 2018 check register, the February 2018 check register and regular meeting minutes.
I'll second that. We have a motion by Vice President Wilson, a second by myself to approve the consent agenda. All in favor, show of hands. Unanimous. Any opposed? I see none. We'll move on. We're now going to a regular session, agenda number 2. Carm.
Carl, we need you.
Okay, we're going to consider,
Flip and do 3.
we'll just,
Oh.
yeah, that's fine.
You ready?
Yeah. Okay, we're
I will.
going to,
We'll flip and do 3, and then,
no, that's all right.
okay.
Okay, item number 2, discussion possible action regarding results of winter average analysis completed by New Gen Strategies and Solution.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening and welcome to the audience. Thank you so much for the history lesson. I appreciate that. Our consultant from New Gen Strategies and Solutions could not be with us today. And I'm going to run through the presentation they prepared that analyzes our winter quarter averaging period, which extended from December of 2017 through February of 2018. That data has been collected, and we have done the analysis work with our consultant. So this presentation will provide some illumination for what that looks like. Let's see, am I going? There we go. Winter average water use for residential sewer billing resets in March of each year. So we look at the winter flows from December through February. We make a presumption that that's the time when most watering is not done, which allows us to really assess how much water is going into the homes and businesses and how much comes back out in the sewer for the purposes of setting sewer rates. The resetting of the winter average requires a revision to the rates in line with the board's adopted budget and revenue requirements. In fiscal year 2018, the board voted to subsidize the wastewater service rates with water service rates. At the time, the full wastewater revenue requirement would have necessitated a 24% increase on the sewer side. A lot of reasons for that, including our investment at the wastewater facility. We had an overage on the water side of the house, and the board chose to subsidize the wastewater revenue requirement with some money from the water side of the house. The results from this year, it's the second year when we've done winter quarter averaging. The results year over year show that residential winter average volumes increased significantly, 12.7%. As a result of that, as these volumes have increased, current rates are producing higher than anticipated revenue. On the commercial side, billed sewer volumes also increased slightly, about 4.3%. The plant flow has decreased year over year, possibly as a result of lower infiltration inflow. This results in a slight reallocation of revenue requirements to commercial customers. This is a comparison of volumes bought in each tier on the residential side. So in the left-hand or the middle column, we see 184,888,000 gallons were used between 0 and 4,000 gallons residential. In 2018, it's up to 190. On down, you see that the subtotal of all of our tiers shows an increase from 325,256,000 up to 366,532,000. On the commercial side, we saw a smaller increase from 93,794,000 up to 97,834,000. The plant flow during that period of time at the wastewater plant decreased slightly from 369,046,806 to 368,612,896. These numbers may not add up exactly due to rounding.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, sir.
So based on that, would it be reasonable to assume that the I&I is roughly, if you look at the reduction in the subtotals from 325 to 366, even though the plant flow didn't increase, that 12% you said was likely due to I&I. Right now, we assume a 5% I&I. Would it be reasonable to assume that we're underestimating our I&I? And then two, what would have changed the I&I so dramatically other than lack of rain or more rain?
Right. There's really nothing that would change I&I more than more or less rain, but in fact it comes to intensity, right? So if the ground is saturated and there are leaks in the sewer system, that's the infiltration part. That, a fairly gentle rain that saturates the soil, you'll see that I&I. The inflow part is a little bit different. The intensity of the rainfall allows water to pond up on roads, pour through the holes in open manhole covers. And that would really go to the intensity of the rain event, not necessarily the total precipitation that fell over that period of time. I don't know if that helps. It is our intent to measure the I&I. I know one of our directors was on a tour, and we were going through the wastewater plant. As you know, we have an influent meter there, and that data is being recorded in the new SCADA system that we're receiving as a part of the construction of that facility. So I went out the other 2 weeks ago to try to capture that data so that it could be presented here. We are not in a place where it's easy to get at yet. So I was able to see a report that showed me one day with, let's say, 1,440 data points per minute flows. But in order to compile all that over the 2-month period from, say, January to the end of February, or even from December through February, we would have had to gone back and copy that from individual reports for every day. It looked like a lot of work, whereas with a little bit of effort, we can create a report that just generates that information, maybe in a less granular but more efficient way to pull the data out of the system and use it. So that's really kind of where we're at in terms of measuring it. But it is a measurable quantity.
I'm not prepared to jump off on the I&I because I'll tell you my personal experience is my previous year's water usage was 3,000 gallons per month for each month of the average. This year it was 4,000, 4,000, 3,000. So I, for one, wasn't as diligent as I was in the previous year. I also had some guests come in and stay. And so I think that it's probably more of that than it is I&I. Just personal thought.
Well, I mean, saying that, I mean, some of the numbers were skewed, as we talked about before. You had one guy that had a winter average of 6,600, and this time he has 74,000. Obviously, that's wrong. There's one that had 7,000, now he's at 52. One that had 15, now he's at 50. One at 7 at 42. There's 10 of those that are way out of whack. Out of the, I only have 4,300 connections. Is that about right, Mike?
Yeah.
Okay. Out of that, only 345 had no change. 1,560 went down very little, and then 2,422 actually increased in winter average. Those are the numbers. So, I mean, you're talking about, the average. I think that number's not right. That's going to translate into revenue because you're not going to bill a guy 74,000 in winter average when he only had 6,600 last year. I mean, there's a big billing once you go over 12, I believe. So that's a lot of revenue, and you have 10 of those.
How do we know that those numbers are wrong versus activity that they somehow embarked upon?
As far as plumbing leak?
Well, I mean, what if the person got a pool and decided to fill it, or?
That's true, but I mean, you're filling it during November, December, and January, or December, January, and February. Yeah. So
There are some variations that say the house wasn't filled last year. It is now, so it had a winter average last year, either 7,000 because they're new
Right.
customers, or had 0 and they're now
Only-
have.
only one of those top 10, or top 20, I should say, that like they just stand out. Only one of those have 333. That tells you it's probably a new house. A couple of them
Right.
were 0. There were 345 that had 0 change between last year and this year. There's some that, as you said, further down that had 0, and now they're at 30 or 40,000. But none of these have 0 for the prior year. They're all, up there, in the average 7, 6, so.
I think that as you look at this, there's not a lot different between what you're talking about now than perhaps what occurred last year, in that in this instance, we have data to go back to the previous year to compare it if you happen to get that entire sheet, which obviously you did. I didn't get the sheet. But my point would be is we have in place in the rate order an ability for those residents who have this particular situation to come in and say, wait a minute, I've got a problem here and I fixed it. Because I know I've talked to some folks that have said, I've had this issue, or I've done this, or I've done that. And my comment has been I said, please go in and see the general, go in, take your data, show what's been fixed, take it in so that we can adjust it. So when I anticipate that probably, if the folks are cost sensitive or if they are concerned, they're going to come in and say, look, we need to talk about this and adjust it, and we can go into that procedure. Now, how much does that impact the overall rates? I think based on our discussion when we were looking at the rate order and how to handle that, when we turned it over to the general manager, it was overall a very small percentage of the total operation. And I think that we're probably in the same situation here.
I don't think it's gonna be a small change when you have, what's the rate over 12? Do you know off the top of your head? I don't have it in front of me. But I know from 12, it starts escalating pretty high. And the whole number, I agree with everything you said, is those people need to come in. And we put notices, hopefully these people had notices on the door that, hey, you're using high water usage. And for whatever reason, they neglected to come in. Now they have a chance up to, was it April?
Oh, no, they can there's no longer a time limit on when.
Well, anyway, the whole bottom line is Chris is gonna run, okay, what we should charge or what the base rate should be or whatever off this revenue with these escalated amounts. You have to be conservative and say, hey, some of these numbers are way out of the ballpark. We're not gonna get that revenue. And that's what I'm concerned with.
And I ran the numbers just to kind of get an idea of what we're looking at. We know we're going to have some customers coming back saying, we know we're going to have some cases here. We looked at the top 1% is 15,000 and above difference, higher than it was last year. We're just trying to get an idea of what we're looking at as far as the revenue, because it will change, and we understand that. We've looked at it. We looked at it, everything that had a leak report. Majority of them all had leak reports put on their door. They failed to come in to fix it, or they have fixed it, and we have a case waiting to go through.
Yeah, and the whole purpose of this is you have to consider that some of these people will come in, and it's not just these top 20. There's people that might be 8, and now they're 12, or 3 and 12. That's not even in. I didn't even break that out. I just went to the top numbers. The variance from 20,000 up. That means they used 20,000 plus. Over what they had last year.
And 12 plus is 914 versus 8 to 12
Okay,
is
so
643.
914, and it's every, every 1,000 over that?
Yeah.
So you figure this guy was using 6,600 last year, and now he's at 74,000. He's gonna have a hefty bill.
Yeah, there's about 12 that are over 20,000. That's going to be a big hit.
There's over
He's
20.
He's 67.
Yeah,
Or
there's
because
1,
of the
2, 3,
67 for that
4,
case.
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. You're right on mark there, Stephen. 12.
Well, and finance guys that can count, what we got to do.
If I couldn't count, I don't think I'd be here, right?
If I may for just a minute. Last year, I think our total, everyone that we readjusted last year that asked us to was below 1% of the total usage. And so these people that, even if they went from 6,600 last year to 74,000 this year, those people have had their water bills and have paid them.
Yeah, 1% of, I think
Yeah,
there are
that's-
4,700 connections.
It's 1%.
That would
of
be like 50 people, and I
Looking
don't
at
think we
44 right
adjusted
now.
50 bills last year. So I wouldn't expect to get a run on the bank because people are more educated this year than they were last time.
And the people that you're talking about are 12 and under. Once you hit that 12 rate, it goes up pretty high.
Oh, absolutely. But the
So-
thing is, though, if you got a bill, to Mike's, or to somebody's point, if you got a bill where you got charged for, if your average is 74, you have to get some pretty significant bills. So this is the fact that your winter average is 74. It's not going to be a surprise to you if throughout the winter your bill was 81, 60, and 73. you're not gonna suddenly, wow, I can't believe it's that high. So I would think those people would have complained prior to that.
The majority of the top, I'm looking at the top 42 that we have here in this list that are over 15,000, majority of them had a 3-month average, actually consistent to 3 months. It's not like we had one large month of 70,000, the rest were at 10,000. So they were pretty consistent. So if there is a leak, it must have been going on for a while. So they should have reported something here.
Yeah, you're gonna have 66 people that have used more than 12,000 over what they used last year. And that's where the rate goes bananas.
Now, that's 1.5% of the total.
But the volume is a lot more.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
But like I said, at that
Here's one that-
1.5, not all of them are
And
actual
this was,
issues.
this is probably a new house you have a guy that did like 1,300. Now it's 2,800.
Right.
It's like, that could be a new house. There's 1,000, 2,300. But that 74 and 52, when they had 7,000 and 66, that's like bang in your face.
Yeah. So,
Okay, sorry to interrupt you there,
please
Carmen.
proceed.
I think the general manager may expect to see some people in.
Oh, yeah, you better keep that door
When
open.
when the first
All
bill
right,
comes.
we have an open door policy, and we are taking the president's advice and looking at those people who are on the 1% list and planning on sending out a follow-up postcard probably this Friday, just to say, hey, we see your winter quarter average is pretty high. Have you had a leak? You ought to look into that and see if there's an active one, because it's there. So we will do that. It's better to be proactive than to wait for them to come in an angry state of mind. So
Yeah, one more thing, it just disappointed me that there's only 1,560 that went down, and 2,400 went up. I figured it might be reversed, but
Well, if old cheapskate over there didn't go down.
I did my part. It's 2,000. Just saying.
All right, Mr. President. So, basically the routine that we use to calculate what we need is they look at that winter quarter averaging, and they look at our revenue requirement to date, subtract off what we've billed for sewer so far, and then look at what we needed for the coming year and adjust the revenue requirement for March through September. In that case, he's put in 2 columns here. One would have been that full 24% increase, which the board did not opt to do back in at the start of the fiscal year. They adopted the 12% increase. But as we can see, our revenue on the sewer side is running a little bit ahead, even year to date, of where we had projected it. So we subtract off the projected minimum charge revenue and come out with a volumetric revenue requirement at the 12% number for the remainder of the year at 1.1 million, roughly. And then if we wanted the full 24, we'd be at 1.4 million. So to some extent, it's good news in the sense that revenues, at least year to date, are slightly ahead of expected or projected.
Let me ask you, Carmen, do you have a forecast of what the revenue was expected to be October through February?
I believe we have that, and it's
Do
cooked
you have
into these
that?
numbers, but whether or
We
not
never had it for years. Do you have that now, Stephen?
it would be in the budget
In
that
other
we
words, you don't
proposed.
you don't break your forecast down month by month, do you?
No.
Do you break it down the first 5 versus the last 7? When the change in the sewer billing changes, do you know what your revenue was expected to be in the first 5 months?
We do, because it's fixed, and it's a fixed number times the number of connections, or whatever that connection's last winter rate was for a 5-month period.
So I
it's a
guess if we
constant.
took the 22.97 million divided by 12, that would give you your monthly revenue that you're expected to get.
It's somewhere in our package because it
Let me
talks.
say this.
Yeah, it's in the packet.
I did a study 5-10 years ago, and I did a month-by-month forecast over a 3-year period of what actually happened. And what I found was that in the first 7 months, that is through May, it typically ran 50% of the year, 49, 51, 50. So if you back that up 2 more months, you put May and April in there, and March, it's 3 more months in fact, then you're gonna be way above 50%. What I'm wondering is the calculation taking into effect that we're probably 60 or 70% of the year left to go revenue-wise by the time we hit March?
We're
Did
five, we're
did anybody
5/12,
consider
but
that?
we're 5/12, but for your house, for the first 5 months of the year, you had a constant fixed rate determined on your last year's winter quarter average. So whatever that number is on your account, it's 5 months times that, so 5/12 of the way. And what we're doing here is either making an adjustment or not to the winter quarter average for each account going forward.
Did you take 5/12 of the annual forecast?
The 5/12 of yours, and then we added them all up. So, yeah.
So basically, it's about 40% for the first half. It's about 60% for the second half, the way it kind of balls apart. If what you're asking, which is in the packet.
You're talking about a 6-month split.
Correct. We went from October to March, which comes out to about $1,078,000, and then from April to September, it came out to 1.5.
So that
Dollars.
It's
reflects,
about a 60-40 split.
Dollars of revenue.
Correct. Yeah, total revenue of 2.583 from October to September, but we broke it up from October to March and April to
Yeah, I
September.
think you've taken into consideration the increased activity that takes place in the last part of the year.
Correct.
Okay.
For increased dollar amount.
What did you say the average flow was, Bill? 4,000? The average winter average?
No, it was 7,000 last year. I haven't seen a number for
Yeah,
this
I-
year.
I got 6,939. That sound about right?
Is
Steve?
that what it is off of this year?
Yeah, based on the 4123, or 40.
so it didn't change a whole lot, just
40.
a whole lot of movement, but
Well, it actually went down a lot more, because if you drop that 74 and 52, it dropped a lot more.
I would venture to guess, even when you subtract those out, it probably only goes down 68, 67.
For some reason, I didn't get that data.
I just copied over, copied last
Yeah,
year.
I've got, the old average is 6.6, the new one's about 6.9.
Yeah,
That's with everything in it, though.
6,910 or something.
6.938.
Yeah, close to
So
that.
it went up
Went up a little,
5%.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's an allocation process that goes on between commercial flows and residential flows. We certainly don't use winter quarter averaging for our commercial accounts. So basically, we looked at the last 12 months of plant flow at 368 million and change. Subtract out your 5% inflow and infiltration, and I would just add, Greg, on that number, you'd asked about it earlier, if it was 6% or 4%, and we'd estimated 5, how big of a difference does that make? At 4, that's a 20% reduction if we're off by that much. But you can see that kind of variability just from intensity of rainfall. We back out the commercial consumption during that period of time based on what we know that went into those commercial businesses. Then the remaining attributable flow to residential is 252 million and change. That really roughly allocates residential flow to be about 72% of the flow coming to our wastewater facility. And on the commercial side, about 28%. So it's the 70-30 breakdown approximately.
I do want to jump in real quick. Very similar to what was last year. Last year was 73 and 27.
yeah.
So it's
So it
fairly
changed
close, a little bit commercial
1%.
higher.
We figured that out.
Thank you.
It wasn't 58 or something.
Nope, not at all.
All right, so I believe this is March of 18 through September of 18, if I'm reading this correctly, Stephen. Doesn't really say, but that's, they're showing that this is the required revenue for the remainder of the year to meet the revenue needs of the wastewater enterprise fund. With the 12% increase that the board had previously approved, subsidizing the increased revenue need on the wastewater side to really to prevent rate shock. That's how I interpreted that. We would need another 1.1 million roughly in revenue. If we were going to the full 24% increase for the remainder of the year, that would be at 1.4 million. With the allocated percentages then, the allocated revenue requirements for residential under 12% would be 805,000, and about $1 million at 24%. As we suggested, we're running a little bit ahead on water revenue, which is, and wastewater revenue, excuse me. So that's having a positive impact on this. On the commercial side, it was 312,000 and 400,000. So I think there's actually a good news story there. We're running a little bit ahead of projected revenues, and I think that gets us to, we got to back up and do the commercial calculations. On the commercial side, if we look at the 12% subsidy from the water side, it's a requirement for an additional $300,000 for March through September of 2018. And at the full 24% increase, it would have been $400,000. The unit rate per 1,000 gallons, which is how we do it on the commercial side, is currently at $5.48 per 1,000. If at the 12% number for our commercial customers, it would go to 5.92, and at the full 24%, it would go to 7.59. You're pressing the wrong button, sorry. So these are the...
We voted to subsidize the wastewater with water.
Yes, sir.
I assume we voted to do that on an annual basis. In other words, if we wanted to change it, we'd have to make a motion to change it. Otherwise, it would continue at the subsidization level. Is that true?
Right. I think you'll see when we get to that slide that, in fact, we're running slightly ahead of revenue, and that the recommendation is to make no changes on residential.
Yeah, I think we approved it for this year, and so it wouldn't necessarily apply to next year. We'd have to approve it again if we want to do it next fiscal year.
Yeah.
But the process, as I understand it, is that we make a mid-year adjustment in the rates
And we would have the option to change it now if we wanted to.
to reflect that, and that's really what we're contemplating here, because I think we are proposing a small change on the commercial side. I'm not going to read my way through this table, but it kind of shows the tiers on how they impact the wastewater side of the house. You all have that in your packet. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But okay, on the residential side, which of course is 72% of our revenue for the wastewater facility, we've got a minimum charge of $19.60, and then it's broken out by tiers. You can see that 0 to 4,000 gallons is currently $3.18. With the 12% increase, it's only $2.67, and then at the full 24, it'd be $3.42. Going down to the highest tier, it's currently at $9.14. If we leave the 12% subsidy in place, we're at $7.66. And it jumps up to 9.83 per 1,000 gallons for those over 12,000 gallons in usage. The substantial increase in residential winter average results in the current rates generating more revenue than anticipated under the board's adopted 12% rate increase. Current rates are still not sufficient to meet the full revenue requirement based on our assumptions. In other words, if rates remain the same or are decreased, the water service will continue to subsidize the sewer service.
So I'm looking at page 13 of
You're jumping ahead.
oh, you're not that far yet.
I'm on 11, so you want to cut right to the end of the story. I
Any
understand.
future agenda items, anyone?
Let's see. So this page is page 11 is full of all the individual calculations per rate class, and I don't know that I really want to get into this unless somebody wants me to go through that data. This reflects the impacts to residential customers depending on their tiers, whether it's 12% or 24%. And now we're to the recommendations on page 13. Our rate consultant is recommending that we use the current action as an opportunity to reduce the wastewater subsidy from water, so it would end up at the end of the year maybe between 12 and 0 is the subsidy part. because we would get more than the 12% revenue that we had projected. We have an upcoming debt issuance, which will require greater support on the water revenue side of the house. So we feel like it's a good recommendation to just allow it to continue at the current rate, which will have the net effect of reducing the subsidy paid for from the water side of the house. That would be to maintain residential sewer volumetric rates at current levels. Customers have adapted to the current rate levels, at least our residential customers have. Lowering rates to potentially raise them later can send a confusing price signal, and we have had some extensive discussion about rate smoothing and, trying to avoid rate shock when dealing with our customers. Also, keeping rates consistent is projected to generate about $155,000 more than was budgeted for residential sewer. We're also recommending an increase in the commercial sewer rate to reflect their slightly increased usage of the wastewater system to $5.92 per thousand.
Does that equate to 1%, the 28% versus 72, or what's that percentage-wise?
Yeah, we just talked about last year's breakout. Was it 73.27 going to 70?
Yeah, the breakout was,
Last year was 73.27.
72, was it
It was 73 and 27 versus
72, 28
72 and 28.
yeah, 1%
So
difference from
That's
last year.
1%. What's the increase percentage?
Oh, as far as the commercial?
I mean, in the volume, you have a dollar amount between that 1% and it equates to, does that rate, balance?
Rate
with
is,
the-
well, this rate is 12% increase, and this is what the recommendation
No,
is 12%.
what this is doing, this is making up, remember before we were subsidizing? Basically, last year, we didn't opt to make it up. This year, we're making it up.
So basically, the number you're looking here, the 592, is 12% higher than it was. This is what our recommendation was 12% because water was going to take half of it, and wastewater is going to subsidize the other half that's low. So this is 12% taking over half of what was needed.
So you're basically no longer subsidizing the wastewater side.
Not
It's
subsidizing
covering
as
it
much.
As much.
as much.
Right.
Still, yeah.
So what's happening is a residential, the 155 is going to take effect to some of that 12% that we're missing that water was going to subsidize for. And we're going to raise commercial to the 12% because there is a 1% difference there, and it's going to eat at some of the, basically some of the overage that we need, the coverage that we need.
592.
Yeah.
I have a question, and I called Stephen at 5 o'clock, and because I'm looking at basically subsidization of sewer rates for residential and commercial. Okay. If we leave the current residential rates where they are and go forward, then those rates are going to fall somewhere between the 12 and 24% increase. So there's a percentage there that they're covering and a percentage that's being subsidized. My question for Stephen was, if I say that the residential calculations are showing a subsidization of a certain percentage, what does the commercial rate need to go to have that same percentage subsidization so I can say that I'm treating both residential and commercial equally? Stephen.
So without getting too far and too much data here that we have, I went ahead and did some rounding numbers here just to kind of give us an idea of what we're looking at. So with the current revenue volumetric rates that we have here, we're looking at about 960, 556, which is about 19%. Pretty close to there. If you go commercial right now, commercial is going to be raising it at 12%. So if you jumped it up to match the 19%, roughly you're looking at about 632, which gives you additional revenue of 44,315. So all in all, you're looking at about 200,000 if all the numbers stayed the same for what the revenue is going to come in and the volumetric. Looking at about 200,000 total.
So what we're saying then is rather than
Commercial.
increasing the 12% to take the commercial rate to 592 in order to equalize out the subsidization value of the water coming on top, we would need to go not to 592 but to 632.
Do you know what the Do we have access to the previous rate orders? Because I'd like to see what commercial was before
Got it
we
here in front of me.
went to winter averaging.
Before winter averaging?
Yes.
Tuesday days of October. Let me pull the other one up.
It was $13.50, wasn't it, the rate? And they paid, they didn't have a cap. They kept paying per
Yeah, they don't-
volume.
They don't have a cap now.
Yeah, they still don't have cap.
And that was the commercial, it's not a penalty, but they paid for whatever water came out and.
Yeah, but before, when you looked at how much they actually paid in, of the total revenue, they only paid in 11%. Because I remember from doing the math, residential paid 89 and commercial paid 11. And so by us having their rate be based on the percentage usage, we actually took away from residential subsidizing the commercial. But that resulted in them taking a pretty big increase.
Yeah, so you had base rate of, this is for commercial, base rate of 1750 and 284 per thousand. And in April, it went to 1535 and 634 per gallon.
And so, I mean, for them, for residential, they had a, pretty much their,
If they used a lot of
it
water.
doubled. No,
Yeah, yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, but.
Their rate
the ba-
doubled.
If you were at the low end, it didn't change. It was
Correct.
still 267 or whatever it was.
Yeah, and they're still paying on everything they use,
It used to
but
be
they're paying
289.
530.
They're just paying for water right now, not irrigation. And, you know, the commercial might spray down the parking lot, they might, wash it outside or something like that, which residents do that too, but not as much as commercial does it weekly. So commercial, to me, I want them to pay their share. I think the $5.92 is fair, but they also, bring business and taxes to this community too, which pay for other things. So you have to,
What would it do to our budget? So it's gonna raise additional $44,000 by making this change, correct?
That
Well,
was
by
the
making,
projected.
if you do with the additional to 632, right?
Well, no,
Which-
no, no,
which-
no,
which
just,
increase?
just if we do what's been recommended.
45 or something like that, I think.
It's
it said.
45K in additional revenue
that's
if we
what-
go with what's been recommended, correct?
It's 23 if you do the 12%, I believe.
What was the number you had, 40 something?
That was if we did it to the 19%. If we match the same rate increase, basically the same percentage increase as residential,
So
instead
an
of just doing
additional
12%.
20,000 or something, right?
It's 23, I think 212.
Yeah, it's not-
And that's what's recommended. That's a 12% increase.
The old one with red line changes. In the old one. You can still see the old one.
You made a comment, the Fort Worth impact fee was it's deleted, but then it was restated on the subsequent page. Okay,
I have to
I
do
got,
that.
I got it.
I put in the new rate as the $5.92, but if we're not doing that, you'll just have to cross that out and we can
Okay.
update it from there.
This is the current rate.
Yeah.
Okay. Continue on.
I'm good. I guess we'd be looking for the board to take an action on making a change to the rate order. I would make one just kind of ironic observation. The gentleman who came and spoke to us during the public comment session, he said he had a lot in between the two houses. That lot was platted before Fort Worth started charging impact fees. So if he wanted to have sewer there today, he would not have to pay Fort Worth for water. He would not have to pay Fort Worth under their new approach.
Interesting.
Okay, so what action do you need to adopt the 592 or whatever you want?
It'd be all of it. I mean, if you want to keep the rates the same, and then if you want to increase to 12% for commercial, the
I-
That's what I'm
592.
saying.
I can,
Or you can go 19 as Bill wanted.
yeah, I think the board needs to make two decisions. The first decision is what you want to do with residential, and the second one is what you want to do with commercial.
Well, to me, you could do that, or you can just vote, they recommended, they only made one recommended change.
Make a motion.
So if you make a motion to do what they recommended, then you only change the commercial. But we'd have to create something because they didn't recommend a change to residential. We would have to
Yeah.
come up with something and recommend they
Well,
do something commercial.
Personally, I'm in favor of leaving the residential as it is. Okay?
Let's do it, I mean, let's do
Okay.
it in two.
Make a motion,
It's a,
You make it.
well, you're gonna need a,
exactly like it should be.
well, if you'll tell me what you want to do with the two things.
I make a
could-
motion that we maintain the current rate of residential, and we increase the commercial by 12% as recommended to 592. And this is on the sewer rates. That's my motion.
I second that.
Okay, I have a second by Director Hayes. Any further discussion?
I'm not, okay, I'm not gonna be able to support it because I think we are subsidizing the commercial more than we're subsidizing the residential with the water. I'd like to keep
Duly
them equal.
noted.
Okay?
Yeah, and I mean,
Well, we're subsidizing, because we are subsidizing sewer rates, okay, with water revenue. I think that subsidization should be equal between residential and commercial. They should both be, if you're gonna subsidize, they should both be subsidized at the same rate.
so you would want to take the sewer to 632, go up to 19%. What's that, 632?
So the 19%.
Yeah, and I guess for me, I'm to the opposite end. The commercial guys last year at this time
big
went
jump.
from 284 to 532. So they had practically almost 100%
Yes.
rate increase, and then to go up another 20%. To me, that's a lot to ask. I mean, and they're not
Okay.
going to complain, but they're
Okay.
a business. But
I understand.
I'm all for being business friendly, and that's
Okay.
not.
Both points have been
Yeah.
noted.
Yep.
There's a motion on the table. All in favor, show of hands. I have Director Hayes, Director Thomas, myself, and all opposed. Got Director Wilson and Director Rose. It passes. So you clear on what the motion was?
I believe so. I think there was a intent that the staff modify the previous rate order to reflect that action.
Right, the only thing you're changing is the commercial.
Well,
You got
no,
what you recommended.
No.
So we
you-
went
no,
out
you
there,
don't.
residential rates on sewer.
No, I
and
got what he
alcohol.
recommended.
Yeah, okay.
Right,
We-
okay.
yeah.
We're gonna move on to agenda number 3, consider and take
Mr.
appropriate action.
President,
Excuse me?
I believe you need to amend the rate order. That's before you,
Okay, it says regarding, so
okay?
do that. We can include
Do we
that
need to
because it says
do a
regard.
separate motion to,
My understanding was the board just approved the amendment to the rate order by adopting the revised sewer rate.
Okay,
Okay, but the normal mode of operation is not to amend a rate order, but to recaption the entire rate order with a new number on the top of it. This is the traditional method of operation.
what?
if Tony says,
You would have to amend the rate order to have it reflect the new rate. Because this is what's gonna be posted.
Tony, what we passed just suffices, correct?
My understanding is that the board just increased its commercial volumetric sewer rate to the 592, and the way that can be done is only by incorporating the new rate into the rate order.
Okay.
If you want an additional motion to reflect that, that's fine, but to me, I thought that was the intention of the action.
Yeah, you can't do it otherwise.
Okay, so as you've currently changed it, it says commercial sewer rates effective October the 1st, 2017, volumetric rate is $5.92.
If you wanna make a motion, go ahead to satisfy yourself.
So is it your contention that this did it from October forward, or that it did it from March forward?
Well, the rate should go in.
No,
effective.
my contention is that your motion, your intent is good, but it's incomplete because it doesn't actually fully amend the rate order.
Okay, we're gonna stop this because we're going back and forth. If you wanna make a motion.
Okay.
Make a motion. If not, then we're moving on.
Okay? I move to amend rate order Trophy Club Municipal Utility District, number 1, order 2017-0919A, amendment to be, change to be 2018-03-2020C. And on item number 202, section, Article 2, section 202, item A reads, will read residential sewer rates effective April the 1st, 2018, with no change on those rates. And item B, commercial sewer rates effective 1 April 2018, changing the volumetric rate to $5.92 per 1,000 gallons. That's the motion.
Do I have a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, we have a second by Director Thomas. Okay,
I thought that's what we just
we
voted.
we did.
But don't worry about it. We
Bill's
just want to
just
move
All,
on.
all in favor, show of hands.
He's just fixing the rate order to match what we
Okay.
did.
I have Secretary Treasurer Rose, Director Hayes, Director Thomas, myself, all opposed. Vice President Wilson opposes. 4-1, it passes. Okay, moving on. Consider any other motions you want to make, Bill? Just asking. No. Do you have any motion? Okay. Agenda 3, consider and take appropriate action to adopt order declaring the following vehicles as surplus property of the district and authorizing staff to dispose of such vehicles. A, truck number 200 dash, it's a 2013 Chevy extended cab pickup truck with 102,929 miles, purchased March 2013. B, truck number 201, it's a 2013 Chevy 1500 pickup with 127,272 miles, purchased March 6, 2013. And they've all only been driven on Sundays, right? Okay, that's the motion.
I make a motion to adopt agenda item 2.
Need 3.
3.
Okay, and that's declaring the following vehicles as surplus property of the district and dispose of such vehicles, is that correct?
Right.
Okay, I have a motion by Director Hayes. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
I have a second by Vice President Wilson. Any discussion? I see none. All in favor, show of hands. I have Secretary Treasurer Rose, Director Hayes, Director Thomas, myself, Vice President Wilson. 4, all opposed. I see none. We move on. Okay, agenda number 4. Consider and take appropriate action relating to cancellation of May 5th, 2018 director election. A, accept certification of unopposed candidates. B, adopt order canceling election. I don't see any candidate or director-elects here, so. Okay, does anyone want to make a motion?
I make a motion that we cancel the May 5th, 2018 director election and accept certification of unopposed candidates and adopt the order canceling the election.
Second?
Okay, I have a motion by Vice President Wilson, second by Director Thomas. Any discussion? I'd like to mention the names of the new directors. Director 3, Kelly Castaway, is that correct? Steve Flynn is place 4, and Mark Chapman is place 5. Congratulations to all of them, I guess. Okay, now we'll vote for the motion. All in favor? Okay, we have Secretary Treasurer Rose, Director Hayes, Director Thomas, myself, and Vice President Wilson 4. All opposed? I see none. We'll move on. Okay, we're on item 5, agenda item 5. Consider and take appropriate action regarding adoption of resolution number 2018-0320A as an alpha, authorizing the general manager to approve construction contract change orders. Do you want to give a brief overview of this, Carmen, or?
I can certainly take a run at it. This is a revision to the last such directive. We worked with council, Tony, to put in changes we felt were, which reflected addressing the concerns that were expressed by the board in the previous iteration of this policy. And that's what you see in front of you. It's a fairly straightforward approach. We're hoping to get to where we, can make reasonable changes to, or I can sign reasonable change orders within the scope of the project, and those of which have been budgeted, so we don't have to call a special meeting of the board to handle ordinary things within a project.
Okay.
I don't know if you have anything to add on that, Tony.
A little more specifically, I think the board wanted to see the $50,000 limit apply cumulatively. Be applied on a cumulative basis as opposed to a per change order basis. So that's reflected in the new order. The 25% has been aggregated with all change orders. We've also added a limitation regarding change orders that would extend the date of completion. But Carmen and I had a brief discussion yesterday or this morning as to weather delays, and we're going to just get some clarification from the board. If there's an exchange order because of a weather delay that's recommended by the project engineers, that's something the board would like the GM to be able to approve for convenience and efficiency, or would the board like those brought back to the board? Pretty straightforward extensions.
We have a pending change order right now that's been signed off on by the engineer. The contractor wanted 5 days. The engineer thought 3 days was more reasonable, and so both the engineer and the contractor have signed off on it, but it extends the contract period by 3 days with no money. So it's just a time change. So the only place that would have an impact on money is in the liquidated damages provision of the contract.
The one that's before you would not allow him to approve those types of change orders, but if the extension is solely because of weather, that's pretty straightforward, and we wanted to bring that to your attention.
How many change orders have we had? Because about 2 years ago or so, maybe less than that, we instructed the staff to, all change orders need to come in front of the board. And I've only seen maybe 1, maybe 2, I don't know. How many have we had?
So I think I've signed 2, and I was not here at the time that was said to the staff, so I probably signed those inappropriately, but I signed them, and they were for small amounts, but things that move forward. I believe we are now on, I want to say that was change order 23 is the one I just saw. We've had several that we've not been able to come to agreement with the contractor on, and so they're just sitting there waiting. One I'll give you an example of is there was a change order to paint the handicap sign in a parking space next to the new admin building. The method for getting the cost of that, the contractor went out and got someone to do it. They issued a change order request for $2,000. Our engineer consulted the RS Means catalog and said that was about a $200, $250 job. And we've not been able to come to agreement on that. So the contract language says that we can just leave that. They did it. It's already done. But we haven't approved the payment on it yet, and that would just remain in place until the end of the project. So, it's something that's in dispute, but the contractor is still required
Where
to
does
do
this
it.
painting take place?
It's painting in a parking space just outside the new little administration building at the wastewater plant on the pavement.
I guess what I'm saying is, or getting to, is that we've had 2, and the project's supposed to be finished up in, it was March, no telling when it is now. Could be May or June, but the whole purpose was to let all the directors know what these change orders are for, and to make sure that they're justified, because in the past, we were getting these change orders that were just being, delayed and moved forward by the engineer and the contractor arguing each other, and we were paying the bill for them to argue. And so we said, enough. If they don't agree, it comes to the board. And we haven't seen anything except the change orders that you're talking about.
Well, and there was one that we just did, either last board meeting or the one before
Right.
for the
Yeah.
60s, but
But Kevin, I think your example kind of gets to the heart of the issue, which if the engineer and the contractor do agree, do you want that change order to come to the board, or do you want your GM to sign
Well,
it?
we meet once a month, and we can meet special. I don't think there's been any times that we couldn't have a meeting because people couldn't meet, And if the whole thing is the board is responsible for the district, and they should be advised and have that chance. It's up to the other directors. You know, 3 of us are only here a couple more meetings, so it really doesn't matter to us, I'm sure, but, you know, it's something that the directors should have a say in, you know, approve it or not approve it.
It's your prerogative.
And 50,000 is kind of high to me too. That's
Well, consider, for example, the projects on Phoenix and Indian Creek Drive. There is a budgeted contingency in those 2 projects that's cumulatively about $25,000, and it's probably where we would deal with tree issues for some of our customers who will be impacted. We still have to sort out the sideboards of that issue, but you know, it seems like it's a budgeted contingency. The one on the wastewater plant, the contingency was lost before we even got started on construction. So,
Yeah, but the point being, if there's a change order, it's not going to need to be done tomorrow. You brought up the trees. The trees are not going to need to be decided on tomorrow. They're going to, you know, there's a project there, and they're going to be at the end. Plenty of time for the board to meet and make a decision. And that's just my opinion as one person out of 5.
I have a question, B and C. Isn't it typical that the contingency would be about 10%? Is that pretty normal if you do a contingency? That's about 10% of the total project?
it's, that's a real common number on linear projects, so pipeline jobs. Retrofits of wastewater plants usually are budgeted with much higher percentages because there's chances for really unforeseen conditions. You find piping you didn't know was buried there, and now you gotta dig that out. Things like that occur, and so typically retrofits of facilities will have a higher contingency, but that's a common number on a linear job, and I presume most of what we'll be doing in the future will be pipe replacement work.
Yeah, the reason why I asked that question is because it seemed like B and C would then conflict. Because if you had a project, and the contract amount, let's say was $100,000, within that $100,000, you would have a 10% commitment. So normally, the budget that would be approved by the board would be not to exceed the $100,000. If we approve this with B and C, effectively, you still wouldn't be able to approve anything because you could not approve anything that exceeds the budget that's presented and approved by the board of directors. Well, if the budget we approved was the contract price plus the 25%, which would be the total amount, then you still wouldn't be able to approve a change order because it would exceed the budget. Does that make sense? Or am I misreading it?
I wouldn't say they're in conflict. They're both separate limitations depending on the contract amount and the contingency approved by the board. One limitation could apply and not the other. So it's all a function of what the contract price is, including the estimate, the issue. To me, there are 2 separate and additional limitations on his authority. One may apply before the other, depending on what those numbers are.
Director Thomas?
Tony, my concern with this item is the way it's verbalized. We had an authorization limit pre-approved. The way this is worded, there is no authorization limit. General manager can approve anything. They could walk in with a $300,000 change request, and he could approve it if we vote yes on
No,
this.
it's
It's
50,000.
limited to 50.
This doesn't say that.
So
Item A says that.
It's in there.
It says the approval of change orders that would result in a cumulative increase or 50,000 or less.
I'm going to go ahead and
Where are you reading that from?
It's under 2A.
2A. I think what I'm hearing, and this was intended only to increase efficiency, but there's obviously a level of,
Let me be clear. I don't have a problem with granting the general manager some discretion in approving these. I don't have a problem with it at all. It just seems to me B and C would basically wouldn't allow them to approve anything because if we budgeted, let's just say the wastewater treatment plant, it was 14.5, and that's what we did as a budget. And so we said you can't go more than 25% or $50,000. But if he cannot approve any change order that will cause the contract price to exceed the budget presented to or approved by the board of directors, he would never be able to approve anything because the budget was only approved at 14.5, And so if he went to 14.5 in the nickel,
But
he
the-
would be above the
But
budget.
if the budget includes contingency, which it typically does, the contract price is less than that, because the contract price doesn't include contingency.
Okay.
So that's the
okay.
gap.
And I assume like for the wastewater treatment plant, when the budget was approved, it was approved including the contingency amount. And that's pretty typical. So if we approved it and we included the contingency amount, then that's already in the approved budget. So therefore, if it went up $1, he couldn't approve it because he's going over the budget amount. And this would restrict that.
Right, but the 25% referenced in B is based on the contract price, which does not include the contingency, which is part of the budget, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would say if we were gonna do this, we'd have to strike C, because if you included C, then he would never approve anything, because the budget we approve always includes the contingency. We never approve, like for the wastewater treatment plant, if the contingency was,
So my intention, and maybe it's not clear, let's say it's $1 million contract. Let's say the budget had a 10% contingency, so it's $1,100,000 budget.
okay,
So in B, the 25% would be applied to the million, so he could never go up to $1,250,000. Can't do that in any event because of the budget limitation. So effectively, he's capped at the budget without board approval.
yeah, and I guess the point I'm saying is if the project was $1 million and we did a 10% contingency, which took it to 1.1, when the board approved that project to proceed, we would say the budget for this project is 1.1 million.
Yes.
And so, because item 3 exists, it says he can't approve any change order that exceeds the budget presented and approved by the board. If we budgeted 1.1, which included the contingency, if they presented a change order for a nickel, he would be prohibited from approving it according to this, because he would have approved the change order in excess of the budget.
Unless the board amended the budget.
Yeah, and so we would have to me, you would have to strike, in order for this to be valid for him, you'd have to strike C.
And that's the whole thing I'm getting at. The directors are responsible for the budget. They're stewards of the residents' money, the customers. And if he approves the 50 and you already went over the contingency, you have to find, where's that 50 coming from?
Yeah, and again, I'm afraid we're getting wrapped around the axle. This is really, the board needs to be comfortable with this. You ultimately are responsible. It was intended, I think, as a way to improve efficiency. A lot of change orders may be, the engineer estimated 1,000 linear feet, and there's 1,002 linear feet of pipe. The unit cost is known. We wait 30 days for that and present it to the board. That's fine. We're trying to do it. Some change orders are, you hit something in the field, and the contractor wants to get out there the next day, and waiting for the board approval maybe it's an emergency and we can call an emergency meeting, but occasionally things happen, and without this flexibility, there could be additional cost while the contractor
Isn't
waits.
there a restriction in this process that says it will be presented to the board at the next meeting?
Yeah,
It says all change orders approved by the general manager shall be reported
Well, they're
at
already-
the next regular
Yeah,
But
meeting.
what we're doing is
But-
giving the general manager a 30-day ability to keep the ball rolling until we meet again.
Yeah, and it's, yeah.
Yeah, again, it's already done, so how are you not gonna approve it?
So I would, Bill,
Yeah, that's all.
Okay, I looked at it, and I come up with somewhat of Kevin's thoughts, somewhat of Kevin's thoughts, somewhat of Greg's thoughts. When I read it, when I see the word budget, the budget is what I adopt annually, okay? I issue a contract. There's certainly a schedule within that contract, and one of those items, when I issue a contract, is the contingency fee. So, like Greg, Director Wilson, I think that A and B conflict with C. I think they both conflict. And then in C, where it says would cause the contract price to exceed the budget to me was something that was originally passed at some point in the year, and it may have been $100,000. Well, we may approve the contract at $125,000. So it's already exceeded, in my mind, the budget. So if nothing else, to me, that sentence is not clear. It could be. Now, as far as conceptual ability for the GM to take action, in my mind, the most lenient I could be is to limit that to some part of the contingency amount within that contract. Either all or part of it.
Yeah.
Because that's what I mean, the contract and that contingency fee is what we're talking about. If it's beyond the contingency fee, now we're talking about additional exposure or costs to the mud, because that additional amount's gonna have to be covered.
Yeah, I think part of the disconnect, in my mind, the contingency is not part of the contract price. The contract price is the amount in the construction contract between the owner and the contractor. Now, for instance, the wastewater treatment plant project, and when I referred to a budget, there was a contract price for, I don't know what the.
$14,995 is what was borrowed.
But there was a budget which included, I think, a 20% contingency, which was, I've heard Carmen say, was eaten up quickly and already because of some platting issues. So that's not part of the contract price. That's part of the engineering budget presented to and I think approved by the board. And so in my mind, there's a difference between the budget and it includes, which includes the contingency versus the contract price, which is the contract price between the owner and the contractor, which does not include the contingency. And so that was my intention in referring to those.
I understand exactly, I understand what you're saying. The problem is I sit here as a board member, and when I make a motion, I look at the total amount, and I look at the contract number and who its contract's going to, and that's my motion. Approve a contract, such and such a number with such and such organization for such and such an amount.
Okay,
In my mind, that's the contract.
yeah,
So,
we're going around in circles
I'd
here.
like to make a motion.
Okay.
So I make a motion that this doc can be modified to give the general manager the authority to approve change orders that, up to the amount of the, I forgot the term, contingency or 10%, whichever's less, and any time changes related to weather, on any contract that's signed by the district.
Well,
That's
there-
my motion.
What about emergencies or things like that?
Well, he can't exceed 10% of the contract price or the contingency,
Okay, I
whichever's less.
have a motion. Do I have a second?
Can I ask a question before you do? Would you consider, Greg, that also approved by the engineer?
Well, but I think we're thinking too much about the wastewater treatment plant because every project
Yeah,
we
there's
have,
street
would there always
projects.
be an engineer?
So I just as a relationship to all the change order stuff, we're doing road replacement and pipe replacement in lieu with the town right now. If everything was to be approved by the board, I mean, I might have a pipe tie-in underneath the street that I need to do that, the engineer and the contractor were on the same page and the contractor's gonna charge another $5,000 to do it. I don't wanna wait 30 days and hold up, project status for something minor like that.
Well, I'm just saying what's in it, and then they can modify it, and so they know what it should reflect. So, quick question, so every project that the district, engages in, we will always have an external engineer that's charged with reviewing the, change orders, cause so that's always the case. So I don't have an issue with modifying it to reflect, assuming the, engineer agrees with the change order.
Can I make a request?
Yes.
If the board agrees with the substance of your motion, can it just be direction for us to bring back a document which reflects that substance? So
Yes.
There's obviously
Yeah.
some concern, and we
So,
want to make sure you see the
Change your
final
motion to
document.
bring back with your changes. that
Yeah,
you said.
if this approved, they bring back the changes and then it's signed at a future meeting
Okay, with the engineer.
with the engineer. And it
Everybody
has to be,
understand?
the engineer has to agree with the
Oh,
change
yeah.
order.
Okay.
And my understanding of your motion is it would be up to 10% increase in the cumulative increase in the original contract price.
But not to exceed the contingency, or the contingency amount, whichever's less. So it can never go above the total amount that's approved, because the board will always approve the total amount, including the contingency.
My understanding of Bill's comment was the board does not approve the contingency.
No, we do improve it. We do
It's-
approve the contingency.
It's part of
It's in
the
the
original
contract
motion.
That's part of the original motion. So my motion is saying he can approve 10% of the contract amount. So in the wastewater treatment plant, let's say it was 13.8, and that was a 700K contingency. He could approve 10%, which would be 1.3 million, or since the continuous only 700,000, now he's limited to the 700,000.
The 10%
Or the contingency amount, whichever's less.
Sure.
Did I get a second?
Not yet. Everyone understand his motion, and is there a second? See none, it dies. Okay, any other motions? No other motions?
Next.
Okay, we can move on if there's no,
And clarification, the lack of a motion, is that reflect an intention by the board that all change orders come to the board?
that's what it,
That's
I say.
Okay.
Now, having said that, I would like to emphasize the point that the thought process has continued as I've listened to the discussion that the board can only meet on a regular meeting schedule. I think it should be realized and should be acted on that you can meet with 72 hours notification. All we gotta do is get the board together. And personally, going forward, I can't speak for the other board members. That does not bother me a bit to be on the call.
I could say for me, if they call a meeting to talk about a $64 change order, I'm gonna have a problem, because I have better things to do in my evening, I have a family, than to come here and talk about a $64 change order. I mean, if you're gonna pay a general manager to come, if the engineer agrees and it's within the contingency, to come in and have a conversation over $64 change order or a date change, when nothing else changes to me, then why have a general manager? We can just get a monkey,
Well,
and I'll have them sit here and do it.
as the discussion goes forward, I don't have a problem working within
Somebody
the,
should have seconded then.
no, well.
I say
we
let's
d-
move on.
okay, we already had, it
Yeah,
died.
It
move
died,
on.
let's move on.
Okay, I understand. Yeah, one more
Clarification on
quick
that.
comment?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't have a problem working within the contingency amount with the general manager's latitude.
Okay,
But as soon as you go beyond that, then I
Well, that
have an
was the
issue.
motion.
duly noted. Okay, moving on. Okay,
Okay.
what number we're on?
Six.
Six, consider and take appropriate action regarding order number 2018-0320B, as in boy, authorizing general manager to approve certain expenditures, sign disbursements, and
Mr.
enter into contracts on behalf of the district and containing other matters relating thereto.
Mr. President,
Yes.
staff requests that this item be tabled. We received some late comments and were unfortunately unable to review and integrate those comments, only from one director, but they came in, it was either this morning or yesterday afternoon. So we have not had a chance and would request that it be tabled and brought back.
Okay, does anyone have any problem with that? We have a suggestion by general manager to table it, and no one has any problem? Okay.
I
item
will
six.
take the responsibility for submitting the,
Well, we knew who it was. so
Duly noted.
He didn't have to say any names. We just looked to the left. Okay. Okay, that was six, is being tabled for the record. Okay, seven, consider and take appropriate action regarding tree replacement options related to the construction of waterline improvement projects for Indian Creek and Phoenix Drive. Did you want to say anything on this item? I forget your name, I apologize. Okay, can you come up to the microphone, just say your name and your address, please?
Veronica Ruin School at One Green Hill Trail. And we have a matured yard, and it's been working for the last 33 years. And there are 3 trees along the Indian Creeks possibly can be impacted because the improvement of the water sewage line. So what I like to do is working with the contractor, try to do the minimum impact if possible for those trees, because tree is not that easy to replace. And especially those trees as a native trees. So I have my arborist, and they have come up with some of the suggestion how to treat those trees when they do the trenching or digging. That's what my concern is.
Yeah, you have actually 2 rows of trees, right? You have 3, and then you have 3 right behind them.
Right,
Correct?
correct.
Okay. Yeah.
And my concern is the one it's closer to the curb, to the
Okay,
street
and you're
side.
gonna have a person there when they excavate, or?
If the contractor can give me advance notice, I can be there to work with them. Is that what
Mike,
your
is
question?
that possible with Tom and?
That's possible. I mean, so right now we're starting Phoenix. I don't think we're gonna be moving over to Indian Creek until
Sep-
around,
Yeah.
September and
yeah, August,
through
September.
September, October, and the street improvement side, I believe it is November and December. But the digging start with on Indian Creek is starting August 1st.
Yeah,
I'll-
so whenever we get over that way and everything, I'll definitely have the contractor
Okay.
reach out, touch base and see what we can't work out
Okay.
to make,
If you
least
would, make sure that
contact.
the general manager has your contact number,
Okay,
and Mike will coordinate that with the engineer and the construction people,
okay,
okay?
all right.
Do you have any other questions or comments?
No, my concern is just only if we can save the tree possible, I'd like to save them.
Okay,
All right?
well, thank you very
Great,
much
thank
for
you.
coming.
Thank you.
Okay, does anyone have anything else on this item?
Well, I wanted, there was, from the last meeting, there was going to be some research done to check on options and see if there's something that we couldn't do to replace the 2 trees at the 2 other locations.
Well,
I thought we approved like $3,000 for him to do it.
we didn't
did.
approve anything. We couldn't, it wasn't on the agenda.
I think last time you were concerned about the legality
Yeah.
making a donation in effect to by praying for a new tree.
Yes, spending money up for improvement of private property, and we talked about if we did replace the trees, whether to do so on the boundary of the right-of-way, just to eliminate that issue.
Well, there's a town ordinance and, as far as easements, and there shouldn't be anything in there, but if it is there and there's need for improvements, it's pretty cut and dry that, whoever's doing the work, the town or the mud or the utilities, those items can be removed.
Yeah, absolutely. And whether or not the board wants to replace the trees
I-
is entirely up to the board, and it can do so within the easement.
They're already
Yeah, but-
barely in the easement. In her case, they're barely inside the easement, and,
The roots are in the easement, though,
yes.
the tree themselves.
So, her arborist may have a suggestion on it. Well, do something to preserve the root
Sure.
system somewhere or another.
Sure.
But to say that we can only pay for a replacement tree if it's in the easement, seems to me like we wouldn't want to do that anyway. That's what's causing the current problem.
Well, I think that was part of the discussion, which was, and it wasn't on the agenda, which I think is why we wanted to continue it this month. But there was some talk where I think Mike mentioned that this line could last 25 or 30 years. And so there was some discussion of whether we did want to replace the trees, because that's a significant amount of time, knowing that in a few decades it may have to be removed or
You did
again
not-
for
you-
work. And I think
You do not have a recommendation that would involve replacing the trees outside the easement.
Well,
not at the,
can't do it.
not at the
Yeah, I
district's
mean-
expense.
My issue
Okay,
is
so
trees.
that was my
Yeah.
point.
Number
We
one,
can't do it, and that was your ruling last month, and you're still with that.
So you were gonna, I mean, there was discussion at that point that you were gonna look into, seeing if there was an option. Yeah, I mean, the general manager talked about a 2-foot square easement in order to put a tree in it, doing that type of thing in order to make it work. But beyond something like that, what you're saying is the tree may not be replaced outside of the easement. Could be put on the boundary edge of the easement, but it couldn't be outside the easement?
The district can't spend public, it's actually the same issue that relates to whether or not you could improve the gentleman's yard for his house, which he requested. That would be an unconstitutional donation of public monies for private purposes. And just paying for a tree on private property would also, when you're removing a tree from within your easement for your project. You could acquire an additional easement right, and the district could improve its own easement right, so that would be a way to deal with the issue if you wanted to do that. You could install a replacement tree within the existing right-of-way if you so chose. I think there was some concern that because of future maintenance of the water line, we didn't want to install any trees, and I thought the purpose of tonight's discussion was to continue those deliberations.
Well, my concern is, number one, you're opening up the door for any future work. If there's a wall or, something else in the easement, you go, well, you paid for that tree back in 2018. And then also, trees have roots. Roots cause havoc on water lines and sewer lines. So you're planting a tree, and obviously it's a type of tree that you plant, how deep the root system is, but you still have roots, and there's a major problem with shifting, or besides the soil shifting of pipes. Is that correct, Mike?
Trees can get into sewer systems, and they do wrap around water pipes.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, the general manager has to come with a proposal, and we vote for it, yes or no. I mean, we can sit here, we rehashed all of this last meeting. I'd really not prefer to go back and rehash it again. We don't have anything to vote on or talk about, so.
I have a question. Does the current water line go underneath that large oak tree?
That oak tree has already been removed, and yes, it did.
It did, okay. I make a motion that we replace the two trees in discussion, the large oak, which has been removed off of Phoenix, and the large Bradford pear off of Indian Creek, and that those replacements be placed on the edge of our easement.
Okay, we have a motion by Director Rose to replace two trees, one on Phoenix and one at, I believe, 543. Was that the number?
556 or 558, I can't remember.
Whatever, on Indian Creek, the one that was in our easement. And is there a dollar value to it, or
Replace with
not
what?
to exceed
Not to exceed $500 per tree.
per tree? Okay. There's a motion on the table. Any second?
Let me clarify one point. When you say on the boundary, shouldn't it be 1 inch inside the easement?
That's fine with me.
I don't think we want to plant it half in the easement and half out of the easement.
Okay, there's a motion on the table. Do I have a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, we have a second by Director Hayes, with a little nudging by Director Rose.
Because this is a matter of replacing the tree inside the easement, as far as I'm concerned.
But there shouldn't, okay, that's fine. Back to my point, there shouldn't be anything in the easement for the main purpose of, utility issues. But, okay, we have a motion. Any further discussion? Okay.
Yes, just that I'm in agreement with what Bill is saying, and that we've already talked to one homeowner about possibly doing this, but they need to understand we're willing to spend up to $500 for a tree. It's not our job to plant it. It's not our job to hire a company to come out and do.
I don't think that's, you said
Well,
replace.
no, he's saying
He's
plant it.
saying replace it.
But not to
Place
exceed
means-
$500.
Not our.
No tree,
My
tree.
point is, our tree going in our easement, no more than $500 per tree.
And what are you gonna do about her tree if it dies?
We'll cross that bridge when we get there, and you won't have to worry about it because you're not going to be on the board.
I didn't know there was a bridge there, but okay, you wanna cross the bridge, get there. Okay, we have a motion, we have a second by Director Hayes. All in favor, show of hands. Okay, we have, Director, Hayes, 4, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, Secretary Treasurer Rose and Director Thomas, 4, all opposed. Vice President Wilson and myself, it passes. $500 per tree to replace the tree, capped at 500, right? 2 trees, one on
trees.
Phoenix for the oak, and I can't remember the address
Bradford
on
pear.
Indian Creek. There's a lady that came to their meeting, right? Okay, and then consider her tree if 1 dies or 2 dies or something.
We'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Okay, cross that bridge, okay. You understand? Come back after May. He said it. Okay. Okay. Moving on.
That's in the easements.
Consider and take appropriate action regarding the February 2018 Combined Financial and Variance Report. A, Combined Financial. B, Combined Variance. Director, Secretary Treasurer Rose.
Okay, the overall big picture is the revenue is down versus linear, but the expenses are down even more. So congratulations goes to staff. Good work. One on the wastewater side, last time I talked about the dumpster emptying and how we had the excess costs for the 1 month. This month, the most recent month, also looks a little high, but when I went and did it versus the budget for the year, it's below the monthly budget, so it's okay. And other than that, it's in the packet if you'd like to look at those items. Therefore, I move to approve the combined financials and variance report.
Okay, we have a motion to approve combined financials and combined variance from February 2018. We have a second by Director Thomas. Any further discussion? I see none. All in favor, show of hands. Secretary Treasurer Rose, Director Hayes, Director Thomas, myself, and Vice President Wilson. You had your hand up, right?
I did.
Okay. Okay, moving on. Reports and updates. 9, receive update regarding Association of Water Board Directors 2018 Midwinter Conference. To all the attendees were myself, Director Rose, and Director Thomas. I mean, the key word there was pretty much Harvey. I mean, everything was focused around Harvey and the destruction it made. There were some sessions that we sat in. I guess there was a lunch one that they went over improvements that certain MUDs did in the areas as far as parks, and most of it was, you know, aesthetics and stuff. So, do you want to go over the breakouts that you did, or? I mean, I've slept since then. I have the book here.
I'm going to, my book may be in my briefcase, but I'm going to say I don't know what it is, so I'm not going to get out because that'd take an hour and a half. I'm going to say that I think important things I picked up was, I think probably the one luncheon speaker who was from Washington, D.C., D.C. Water, talked about rebranding, old infrastructure, how to get your message out to your customers on your requirements for infrastructure, and how to turn the perception around about expenditures for infrastructure, water and wastewater. I found that presentation to be very valuable.
Yeah, one thing that I liked was, I think it was during the lunch, where they actually had a chart that I thought would be very beneficial to put on our webpage that showed, okay, if you use a dishwasher, you use X amount of gallons. If you use irrigation, if you have a pool, what it does. If you have a toilet leak, it's 0.86 per gallon. So it equates to 619 a month, so on like that. There was a whole list of them that I thought was very beneficial, where you could just put it on a web page and, you know, educate our customers on, okay, if you have a leaky faucet, okay, it looks like, oh, it's dripping a lot, but you know, compound that over 30 days or a year, it's a lot of water. And especially with irrigation leaks, those were, I think, the biggest one that he said. So if we could possibly direct staff to get that information from Mary, I guess she would have it, you know, Mary Leonard.
They said all the presentations were available online, so.
Online?
Yeah, they're
Okay.
available online.
So if we could get that offline and maybe give it to Michelle, I'd like to direct staff to do that. Does anyone have any problem with that? Okay. Carmen, you got that noted?
Understood.
Okay. Anybody, you have anything, Jim?
My-
Your last AWBD, and
Well, I
you didn't
kinda,
get to stay in the Hollywood suite there, you know, kind of.
I picked up on the same thing Bill did, particularly about how the guy in Washington went about informing the public of what was going on and to get their buy-in. And it just, it's just something for future consideration is maybe we have something on our own website, which is a recapitulation of our meetings, where staff does a kind of a PR, if you will, presentation of the various decisions we've made and how it benefits the community and where we're going. That might be helpful for people to be able to see.
I'll just add on. from the DC presentation. I think the general manager sent us a picture not long ago of some guys down in a hole, in the dirt, working a water issue out here on Indian Creek Municipal, down here on the corner. And my comment was, that's an excellent demonstration of where some of your dollars are going. I mean, there were 3 valves down there in the dirt that were being replaced. And
Deep in
those
the dirt.
deep in the dirt. And those things fail. And that was, I think, a $49,000 project.
Yeah, let me correct that. I think they were added. We did not have enough isolation valves on the system. So,
Okay.
you know, it's an addition that allows us to, you know, the basic process when you have a leak is you find the upstream and downstream valves and you isolate the leaking section and you dig it up and fix
Okay.
it. That'll, you know, if you don't have valves very often, that can put a lot of people out of water while you're waiting to get that line fixed. So those isolation valves, as I understood it, really narrowed down, just because of where it is, our ability to, for example, take the clubhouse offline separately if they have an issue over there at the country
Yeah.
club. I don't think we had that ability before. We had to do that project on a day when the clubhouse was closed. So
But here again, we're improving our service to our customers. And when you talk about the isolation valves, it was interesting in the presentation because one of the things the fellow from DC said is they went out and checked the torque value on opening and closing the valves to determine the status of the valve in the ground. So they knew that if it was getting harder to turn, they were going to have to replace it. So, I mean, it's just good, it's
Yeah.
planning ahead.
Yeah, along with what Director Rose is saying, I think it'd be beneficial if, when you have a break or something like that, maybe Michelle goes out and does like a short 5-minute video, you know, once you have it exposed, and just show people, okay, this is what the line looks like underneath the ground and what a saddle looks like, you know, things like that. I don't know if you're gonna get a lot of visibility, but at least it's on there for people to get an idea what you guys do out there. You know, you just don't drive around and read meters incorrectly and stuff, so.
Carmen, what I was kind of saying is you get a lot of repeat business on the website. When you go look at the statistics, a lot of people are coming back. If you have a place that you create on that website that Michelle can work with under your supervision, where you talk about the positive kind of things that are happening within the community from the MUD's perspective, your dollar, I like the term using, your dollar's being spent. I mean, I think folks, once they pick up on that, they'll start looking at that, and particularly if it's a quasi-real time kind of thing where you're posting things all the time, you'll cause people to come back to it, see what's going on, and create some positive, you know,
And
information.
jokingly on the meters, it wouldn't, there's YouTube clips out there on the Badger meters, the RF capabilities, that would educate people, because, I mean, we had one person that said, oh, I had a planter sitting over the access to it, and they could have never read the meter. You know, we don't have to remove your plant. You just drive by. And if you go through that process, maybe, you know, Michelle or whoever, maybe one of your guys can hold the camera, but just go through the process, how a meter is read, so people understand, you know, that, hey, we don't read the meters, it's all done electronically.
That would be cool, little 1-minute how-to videos of basic MUD functions.
And that
to
was my
give
idea,
visibility.
my idea.
I'm taking it, you'll be
Okay.
gone.
That's
I'm
right,
taking
that's
credit.
right, okay, that's right. Okay, anything else? I'm just gonna, every agenda item, the next meeting, I'm gonna go, let's table it to the next group. Table it to the next group. So it should be, what, a
Table the
5-minute
next
meeting?
meeting?
Yeah, okay. I think the next group needs to make this decision. Okay, we're at 10, General Manager Monthly Reports and Updates.
Mr. President, I placed in your packets my version of the written report, and it has the other standing monthly reports appended. I have had my computer lock up twice now, so I can't pull it up and read it to you, but I'll be happy to try to answer any questions you all have.
I've read it, I don't have any questions.
Yeah. I've mentioned this, and Tony, tell me if I'm out of line here. I mean, in fact, I'll wait till future agenda. Then I won't be out of line. Okay. So, anybody have anything for General Manager?
I do.
You've been
Okay.
out of line for 16 years, and all of a sudden you decide to do it right.
18. Let's get
18 years, okay.
Okay, on the SSO on lift station number 2, I know we've had this conversation, but we need to determine a reason for the short and determine if the issue is applicable to our other lift stations so that we can take appropriate action if there's something that's going to carry across. So when we get out there and dig up that line, we need to make sure we get a good look at it.
We will do that, and I do have a quote. It exceeds, the quote that I have exceeds one parameter in the procurement procedure by about $400, so I have to go out and get some other quotes to do the work as well. But we will be, in fact, doing that and doing a condition assessment walkthrough on all of our lift station facilities to make sure we have sufficient resiliency and redundancy in that system. We really depend on it. I will say that in this particular case, because of where the short was, there's been a kind of long-term plan to put in backup power capacity at each of our lift stations. I understand there's 10. Is that right?
11. No, there is 10.
Okay, so, well, anyway, so the numbers moved a little bit, but it's like 1 through 9 and 14. Nonetheless, you know, I have not personally been to all the lift stations yet. Director Rose chided me for that a little bit. I think that's fair. I'm going to make sure that I get out to see each and every one of them. We do have some that are getting old, and we're working on some of the other aspects of lift stations, but we all depend on them. In this case, because of where the short was, the backup power would not have helped. We did have a small SSO. It was estimated, the final estimate was 600 gallons. So not large in the grand scheme of things. But it is what it is. I mean, the sewer's designed to spill when it's not functioning properly, and that's what occurred. I think our staff had a yeoman effort to basically pull that water into the truck and shuttle it back to the plant. We went somewhere between 30 and 50 different trips between the lift station and the wastewater plant. We had one small spill in that whole process. So, you know, I appreciate the effort and the stick-to-itiveness of the wastewater staff. They under trying conditions.
On the next one, breaks and leaks, talks about a saddle coming off on apparently on a water line.
Probably
My
Mike
question,
talk about that.
similar question as I have for the wastewater side on the lift station. Why did the saddle come off? Was it metal failure? And what are the long-term implications for like parts throughout our system?
Yeah, I mean, depending on, we don't really have a great dirt in Trophy Club once you get down to like water mains. It's pretty corrosive. So a lot of the older brass saddles and, you know, stuff that wasn't made with stainless steel like they are now. I mean, even some of the newer stuff, it even specs those brass saddles, but depending on what your ground, you know, is made up of, it'll eat those saddles up, and eventually those saddles will just blow off.
Okay, so this particular one on
This was-
Panorama Trail, how long do you think it's been in the ground? That's relatively new.
Panorama Trail, I'd say it was probably in the ground 20 plus years.
Okay.
And so if
So
you
just-
read the report, you know, once we do that, we do have to shut the water down, and just like the wastewater side, on the water side, there's reporting. If we lose pressure and drop below 20 PSI, you
Yep.
know, we take a back T sample in for every 1,000 feet that we've got in to, you know, certified lab, have those
Okay.
results come back to make sure we're compliant.
So the probability is that in some of the older sections of town, if we haven't replaced the water line for some particular reason, we could be anticipating an increase in this particular type of issue.
It's a common occurrence for us.
Okay.
And actually, this one started off, when we first looked at it, it almost looked like an irrigation leak, so the saddle didn't actually blow off. I guess you could say we were a little bit proactive in fixing it because we did have water coming from somewhere that we figured was a saddle.
And the last one is 16-inch water line project. Do we have any idea when PD 30, when they're looking at having the line complete across PD 30? Has there been any discussion with those folks on when they're gonna be finished so that we could tie in coming back the other way?
Not that I'm aware of, but I know that we're accelerating that first phase in an effort to get water to them.
Okay.
They really can't go vertical with their construction until they've got fire protection on site. When the water line makes it to the other side, I don't know that we've discussed that just yet.
The last email, I think I sent that to you from the developer, they were asking us when we were gonna be done with that. And also, if not, if they could make one of their taps that they have on their prints to feed water to their development. So I think they're moving very promptly along with it. I've been contacted by a lot of vendors asking us, you know, what kind of type of materials, fittings, different aspects. So I know that they're putting all of their water line stuff, you know, inside PD 30 out for bid.
Okay.
Are they actually doing stuff there,
I
other
don't
than
think
calling,
they've,
calling you?
no.
Okay.
I don't
Yeah,
think
'cause
they've
I was about to
started
say, I haven't
turning
seen them
dirt
doing
yet.
anything. So apparently getting all their phone calls in first.
Well, and it's just been from different vendors. I'm sure, you know, the only reason I know that, one of the people that called me and was asking about some of our specs has worked out here before. So he said that they were bidding that job.
Okay, anything else?
Nope, that's it, thanks.
Okay. Moving on, executive session. Pursuant to section 551.071 of the Texas Open Meetings Act, the board may consult with its attorney in executive session on a matter in which the duty of the attorney to the governmental body under the disciplinary rules of professional conduct of the State Bar of Texas clearly conflicts with Open Meetings Act, or to seek advice of counsel on legal matters involving pending or contemplated litigation or settlement offers. A, seek legal advice and opinion regarding lease agreements for a district-owned property located at 100 Municipal Drive and 1501 Junction Way. And to say 12, item agenda 12 is deliberations pursuant to section 551.076 of the Texas Open Meetings Act regarding the deployment of security devices at the wastewater treatment plant. I don't know if deployment's the correct word, but, okay. It is 8:23, and we will go into executive session, and we'll take, you want to do a short recess?
Yes.
Okay, come back here at like 8:30. Is that enough time?
We're gonna do it here, back there.
We can do it here. Is that all right? Or you want to go back there? Carmen? 8:47, and we will return to
Strike
regular
that. I
session.
want straight cash.
13 is consider and take appropriate action on matters deliberated in executive session. On 11A, give direction to the general manager to get with the town manager over lease agreements. I make a motion that we do that, or we don't even have to make a motion, it's just direction, right, Tony?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Does anyone have any problem with that? Okay.
What?
Okay, moving on, items for
Time
future.
out, time out.
What?
But you can't, you're not allowed to take action in executive session. You have to take action outside of the executive session, I believe. Isn't that right? If you're gonna
Yeah, I don't
direct
think
it.
we're
Yeah.
outside of it.
We're
Yeah.
outside of it.
Okay,
He
so-
said, have him just talk to the town manager.
We ended executive session.
Yep,
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Okay, do you have any other problem? Okay.
I
Can,
misunderstood
13,
then.
consider, oh, we did that.
didn't.
14, items for future agenda. I have one or a couple requests. Number one, could we get the packet or the information, you know, like, there's a lot of things, lease agreements, the change order. Can that be part of the packet when it's posted, rather than give it to us on a Monday or something? I mean, I know some directors said they didn't have time to read it. Another recommendation is, we have like this month, there's March 12th. The directors had a deadline to turn information in. There's items on here that we know are gonna be on the agenda, the staff knows they're gonna be there, like the change order, like the presentation for the water. I think it'd be beneficial for the directors to know those items that are gonna be on there in case they need additional information. I think you need additional information on something. You said you came in at 5 o'clock or something.
No, I had a question, but
Okay.
I needed,
But if you did need it, if they tell you this item is gonna be on the agenda, we already know that the future agenda is gonna be on there, we know the variance report, but there's topics that are gonna be on there where if the directors could be notified before the March 12th, or extend the date a little bit further, so if you need additional information, like if you read change order and go, hey, I think, I need more information on this, the staff can get that rather than wait till it's basically asking us, okay, what do you want on there? And we don't know what's on there to ask for additional information. You know what I'm saying? If there's a topic on there, mine was the water report. I knew we had to do it, but I didn't know, number one, I didn't know Chris wasn't gonna be there. Number two, I wanted it broken down into what we discussed, how many people, what the average was, and so it was additional work, not a lot of work, that Stephen, pulled that report and he sent it to me, and that's how I got, okay, this many people went up. I would have never asked for that, if I didn't see it on a draft or something like that, and it was after the March 12th deadline. So it's a recommendation, whether you do something on it, I don't know, but I think,
Kevin, to clarify, are you asking that a draft agenda be circulated perhaps another week in advance so the directors have notice of the topics?
well, I think the directors need to know the items that are on there, so maybe they need additional information on it, so we don't sit here and talk about something and say, let's table and move it to the next meeting.
So right now, I think the draft agendas are going out the week before the meeting.
They're going, last week, they came out on Thursday, I think.
And so is what you're proposing saying, could we accelerate that by a week?
Or a few days. I mean, the 12th was was director's cutoff for putting items on the agenda. And the draft agenda came out, whatever the Thursday was, the 14th or something, I don't know, what day?
I
Are
heard
you
we were gonna have,
asking-
I'm sorry, go on, Jim.
Are you asking for the attachments as well as the agenda?
Attachments should be a given. I mean, I don't know, this month I was,
I mean, if you want advance notice.
oh, no, we don't need to know the attachment. Like,
Okay.
all we need to know is the topic.
Right.
So we can get back with the staff and go, hey, can we expand that topic, or can we, make sure that this backup is part of that topic? So,
Well, just to mention the agenda item without having to worry about the backups.
I heard that.
I know Carmen thinks we spend an inordinate amount of time, his staff does, getting ready for these agenda meeting, the agenda and all the attachments. But if you're just asking them to list the agenda item as you see it generally on the agenda, without the attachments, that they know about at the time they issue a request for, a request that we give them agenda items.
well,
It doesn't seem to me like that's a very big item,
Well, I heard we were supposed to be getting some new software that would allow us to do agendas in advance. So if we know, for example, like we're gonna have the rate study coming up, I think that happens every year at the same month. I heard that new tool will allow those items to be pre-populated at the month that they're going to occur, which I think would satisfy, Director Carr's position, which is, we would see that, so I think that's gonna happen in the future, once we upgrade our capabilities on our agenda software. That's my understanding.
There's certainly some items which we talk about at one morning and we all know, one meeting, we all know will be on the next meeting agenda.
yeah, an example is, right now, we know that that change order approval is probably gonna be discussed at the next meeting. Is that right?
I'm gonna make a motion about that tonight, just because I think some people didn't understand the motion I made. So I'm gonna,
Well, you can put it on the future agenda.
well, I can
But,
bring it back.
okay, we know that's gonna be on there, but March 12th, I mean, we have a blank sheet and say, okay, what do you want on there? Well, tell me what we already know is gonna be on there, and maybe I can add to it.
Yeah, I think it works both ways, so, and Lori would know better than I do, but my sense is the directors themselves ask for items to be included on the agenda at the end of what would be last week.
Right.
So we aren't in a position to bring those to you. Certainly staff knows about some which we can send out, but a lot of it comes from the board.
Yeah, we're not asking for a pre-notification of the ones we are going to suggest, we're just simply saying, give us the agenda item in sentence format, approximately 1 or 2 sentences.
Right.
That you know, meaning the staff knows, is going to be on the agenda. So tell us what they are, because we may have a question, we may want to have an agenda item in our mind on that subject that's already on the agenda.
Okay. And so I think right now staff sends it out Thursday before?
It's in the bylaws, and I send it out on Wednesday, the draft.
Okay. And
Wednesday
so
prior.
instead of that Wednesday, when would the board like to get notice of those topics?
Well,
mean, you can
at
keep the-
what date do you generally ask us for input on agenda items?
It's in the bylaws of the
It seems to me
policy.
like
I
it's at
send it
least a
out.
couple of weeks.
It's that Monday or something.
Yeah,
isn't it?
it's like the Monday before.
Yeah.
I mean, my biggest challenge is what you see on the agenda, you have changes being made up until like 10 minutes before the deadline. And so,
Don't care about those. Those are gonna happen no matter what.
There's no reason
I mean,
for 'em.
what you know on March 12th in this month, you would have known, you have a basic outline of what's gonna be on the agenda. Just send those to the directors the prior Friday and say, okay, you have till March 12th to add something to the agenda. And just be done with it. Doesn't have to be,
Yeah.
Or just send it out on March the 12th
yeah.
and say,
Yeah, you got it.
I'm asking you, do you have any agenda items?
Yep.
And here's what I already have
Yep.
listed to be on the agenda.
I mean, okay, we beat that down, that's a suggestion.
I don't
Okay,
know.
my next one is, I've already mentioned it, is, I mean, if you have an agenda, comes out Friday, I mean, have the backup attached to it. Number one, it's posted online, so the people that want to attend, they should be able to see that backup. Obviously, there's not gonna be things that aren't ready until the meeting, but it's, I mean, when we start getting things like this at the meeting to look over, make a decision on, it doesn't do us any justice. Go ahead.
It seems to me we're having a discussion about items for future agenda.
Yeah,
Okay, so the item would, in one sentence would be,
the future agenda must have talk about I guess, the format of the agenda.
How about next agenda, we will have an agenda item for agenda preparation and packet
Perfect,
materials. We'll include
perfect.
So we're gonna have agenda to talk about the agenda?
Yeah,
that. Well,
okay. Anybody else have anything for the future agenda? You got the floor.
I'd like to,
That's it, we're done. Okay. you
I'd
want
like
to-
to bring back item number 5 again to make a new motion.
I'd agree with that.
Okay, we're gonna request Vice President Wilson to consider and take appropriate action, adoption of resolution number 2018-0320A, authorizing the general manager to approve construction contract change orders.
Yeah, and my motion would be this, that we strike the language in the existing one and have the general manager come back with one that equals this, that the general manager can approve make a change to a contract up to 10% or the amount of the contingency, whichever's less, which means it cannot exceed the total amount budgeted. Plus, the general manager can approve any time-related issues related to weather, as long as it doesn't have a cost that supersedes the previous one, either a 10% increase or the amount of the contingency, whichever amount is less.
You lost. me, general
Second.
manager. Okay, we have a second by Director Rose. I think it may be easier to just have the board direct you to get with Carmen to put in your language.
Well, what I'd like to do is to
And then-
get the board to agree that they're okay with that. If they're comfortable with it, essentially what it's saying is that the general manager can take any contract we have, and the general manager can approve a 10%, any change order that does not exceed 10% of the contract price, assuming it does not exceed the amount of the contingency. So let's say if the contingency is only 5%, then his ability to approve a change order would be limited to 5%. If the contingency is 30%, then his ability to approve change orders would be limited to 10%.
So the $50,000 that's there now goes away?
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with the language, but I'm not in favor of approving anything until you put that language in a contract. You said get rid of B.
Well, what they would do is, so if we're comfortable with the concept, they're to come back with a new agreement that we look at to make sure at the next meeting that is consistent with what we approved this time.
And to Jim's point, the 50,000 won't go away because there's some statutory provisions which limit the authority, the delegated authority to $50,000 or
Okay.
less. And so if it was a $5 million contract, the
He
10%.
couldn't do $500,000.
He couldn't do
Do a
half,
half a
he couldn't
million.
do more than
Okay,
50,000.
so
Okay.
based on his motion, we're not approving it, we're just approving for him to
Come back
get
next
with
month.
them and insert the language. Is that what I
Yeah,
understand?
So in terms of, yeah, it'll be what Greg just described, but I will make sure the statutory limitations are also
Okay.
reflected.
So we're not approving it, we're just
Well-
approving him to put the language in.
Well, what I'm requesting is that we approve it. So if the language is there, we're not now going back and debating,
Yeah.
well, is it 8%, is it this or that? I mean, we can,
Well, the-
obviously, somebody has to second it, and either people vote
Well,
for it
he,
or they don't vote for it.
Director Rose already seconded it.
Okay,
Okay,
so does
but
it make sense to
again,
everyone?
I want him to come back with
yeah.
the language before I approve it.
Yeah,
I understand.
Because
yeah. And
we're not approving it. We're
no,
basically
he's
giving
saying he
guidance.
wants us to
No, he
approve
wants
it.
it approved.
No, I think he's approving preparation of a resolution, but you'll consider that next month.
Yes.
That's not what you said.
Well, for me, I wanted to approve, and we just have to
That's
get,
what-
make
so
sure
his
the language
motion
makes
is
His motion
sense.
is not to do that, Tony. His
Yeah.
motion is to approve it.
Yes, my motion is to approve it, because what I wouldn't want to happen is to come back and then have the same conversation for a third time.
Well, we have to approve it next, there'd be limited conversation if everybody agrees that that language is sufficient, you know, but I'm not, whatever. We have a motion on the table. All in favor, show of hands. Okay, Director Rose and Vice President Wilson, all opposed? Okay, Director Hayes, Director Thomas, and myself. I'm in favor of making a motion that Greg's language gets implemented into this change order contract,
Then it comes back.
and then comes back next meeting, and it's 2018-0320A. So whatever he said before, that's on tape,
Are you guys okay with me working with the?
and
general manager
also,
to-
also authorize Vice President Wilson to work with General Manager via Tony or whatever's needed to bring the contract back at the next meeting with the language that he said. That's my
Don't throw it
motion.
away.
A long motion, but,
I'd second that.
okay, we have a second by Vice President Wilson. Any other discussion? All in favor, show of hands. Okay, got, Secretary Treasurer Rose, Director Hayes, Director Thomas, myself, and Vice President Wilson. Anything else?
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Are we at the, I
Future
think
meeting.
that was the only one we had
Second.
left, right?
I thought we just talked about
Okay.
future meeting.
No, that was future,
Meeting dates.
future meeting dates.
Number 15, set future meeting dates. Regular board meeting on April 17th, 2018 at 6:30 PM.
I will
Everyone-
not be here.
Anyone have any problem? Any trips, Jim? Camping trips, you know, Israel, Egypt, or anything like that,
I
Jim?
don't think on the 17th.
Okay.
I will not be here.
You won't be here?
No.
We'll be done by 7.
They will- Okay. Okay. Next meeting will be April 17th, 2018 at 6:30 PM. Okay, adjourn. Meeting adjourned.
I move to adjourn.
Okay, a motion by Secretary Treasurer Rose, second by Vice President Wilson. All in
hand.
favor, show of hands.
Thank you.
Unanimous. Director Rose, Director Hayes, Director Thomas, myself, and Vice President Wilson. All in favor, all opposed, I see none. The meeting ends at 9:03.
60 days and counting.
What's 60 days?
Is it 60, Jim?
It's really 30.
It's really